Yep.
Okay, great. Okay, so the topic of today's session is using maps in Flow. And maps are a very commonly used and popular use case in Flow. So a lot of people use maps. So I'm just going to take you through some of the fundamentals of maps today. We'll actually build a few maps and put some colorization on them and put a swarm of data on the map and see where we go. Now, if you have any questions as I'm going, please feel to interrupt. So I'm going to start by creating a flow. And I'm not going to be repeating the tutorial we had on the objects timeline, which we did a couple weeks ago. But what I am going to do is I'll show you a few things in the objects timeline, but they'll be closely associated with maps. Okay, so I've pulled up my first. I've got my first step. I'm going to put my first swarm onto that step. And I'm going to come over here. Let me just move this Zoom window out of the way. Okay. What I'm going to do is I'm going to choose a data set from our library. And this data set is going to be 10,000 cities. So these are the 10,000 largest cities in the world. The CSV file on those cities looks like this. We've got the city name. We've got the latitude and longitude, which allows us to place these cities onto a map of the world. We've got the country, we've got the population, we've got the continent, and a few other fields. So pretty simple data set. In this particular data set, we're going to be most interested in the city, the country, the population, and the continent. Okay, so that's what the data set looks like. So the first thing I advise people to do as soon as they define a data set, I advise them right away to put a pop-up on this data set. So by clicking on one of these dots, they can see what data is behind the dot. And every dot represents a row in the CSV file. In this case, there's 10,000 of them. Okay. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to come down to our interactions section, and I'm going to put a certain type of pop-up on, which we call an overlay. There are other types of pop-ups also, 3D text and 3D images that can kind of float in the 3D space. The overlay appears at a fixed point or a choice of one of 6 different points on the screen. I just use it because it's simple. You know where to look. It's not going to get in the way of any of the dots. And so that's just what I'm going to be using. So these are the columns in my CSV file. So I'm going to choose the city, the country, the population, and the continent, I think. Okay. And over here, I'm just going to put in some text. This is preface text that precedes the value that's going to be displayed. You don't need to put in the preface text, but sometimes it's just very useful. It doesn't have to exactly match the name of the field, the column in the database. So I'm just going to put pop for population, and for continent, I'll spell it out. I'm going to position this pop-up to appear in the upper left-hand corner of the screen. It's one of several choices. Okay, so I'm going to do that. So now, anytime I click a dot, I'm going to see the city, the country, the population, and the continent. Okay. So there's a city that's in Asia. Here's one that's in Holland. Okay, so we got the 10,000 largest cities in the world. By default, when a swarm is created in Flow, it's put into a random space that's 1 meter wide, 1 meter tall, and 1 meter in depth. So this is a 3-dimensional space. I'm not sure how well you can see me spinning the space in Zoom, but I'm assuming you can see it spinning a bit. Okay. I can zoom in, I can zoom out on this space by using the scroll wheel on my mouse. And by the way, the way I spun the space or the camera position is by holding my I've left-clicked my mouse and I've swiveled it. Okay, so what I'm going to do here, okay, these dots are all well and good, but what I want to do here is do something more useful with them. I'm going to add a step, and I'm going to duplicate the step. So now I've got step 2, which is a duplicate of step 1. I duplicated it so I would be able to inherit everything I've already done on step 1 over into step 2. So on step 2, I've got my query here. Okay, this is, this is the city in China, 406,000 people. Okay. Okay, so now what are we going to do? The purpose or the topic of this session is maps. So let's see what we can do for maps. So for this particular swarm 1 on step 2, I'm going to come over here. I'm going to define the chart type. And the particular chart type I'm going to have is map from coordinates, which means that I'm assuming the latitude and longitude coordinates of the city is in the CSV file that I'm going to be using. So map from coordinates using which map? It's asking me here. Well, turns out there's only one map. Oh, excuse me. Okay, I haven't defined the map yet. Okay, I'm going to come over here. I'm going to tell what kind of map I want to use. Okay, so here on step 2, I'm going to define a map here. It's going to be a map of the world and the spherical representation. So this is map 1. So the choices I have here, we've got a choice of about 15 different maps, maybe 12 or 15. We've got maps of Europe, United Kingdom, India, France, China, Bangladesh. We just finished a large project for the UNDP in Bangladesh. That's why we happen to have those 2 maps of that. We've got a map, several maps of the US and a map of the world. So I'm going to choose the world map, and I'm going to choose the spherical representation of it. I could also choose an equirectangular representation or a Mercator representation. For this demo here, I'm just going to choose the spherical representation of the world. Okay, so you can see the map. It's hidden behind some of these dots. Once I put the dots on the map, it'll be very clear what it is. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do, I've got this swarm of dots that are represented right now in a random orientation. I'm going to map from coordinates. I'm going to be using map 1. The latitude column is latitude. The longitude column is longitude. Get that map 1. Okay, so as soon as I do that, instantly those 10,000 data points are placed onto the appropriate places on the map of the world. Okay, so here you can see not many cities here in the Sahara Desert area. Lots of cities in this area of China and southern India and the like. So probably no surprises there. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do a little bit of configuration on these dots to give them an altitude or a height that they can be displayed over the Earth. And I'm going to make that a function of the population of the cities. Notice I can still query on these cities. You know, this is the pop-up that I put on step 1, and it's carried over to step 2. Okay. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is this. I'm going to be defining a swarm attribute. So I'm making sure that I'm focused on swarm 1 on step 2. I'm going to come over here, and I know where to click here. I've been using Flow for a while. No way you would have known it necessarily, but I'm going to do an additional dimension, and the particular dimension I'm interested in is a height offset. So what this means is I'm going to give an offset from the map is proportional to whatever column I pick here. And the particular column that makes most sense is population. Okay, so now what I've done is I've elevated the dot for a particular city over the map in relationship to the population. The minimum and maximum populations, by the way, in the CSV file are 40,000 and 37 million people, respectively. And what that corresponds to is an elevation of 0 for the 40,000 person city, and an elevation of 0.1, kind of an arbitrary measurement here for the 37 million, the city with 37 million. So what I'm going to do here is let me put a little bit of additional texture into this elevation. So I'm gonna instead of a maximum value of 0.1, I'm going to make this maximum value, let's make it 0.4. So the largest cities of the world are going to be out here, and the smallest ones are going to be very close to being adjacent to the surface of the Earth. Okay. So let's see if we can make this a little bit more usable. And one thing we do for showing you where on a map a city falls is we have something called connections. That is a swarm attribute. So I'm making sure I'm focused on the swarm here again. And I'm going to say new connections. Okay. So what Flow is going to ask me now is, okay, what kind of connection do you want? And the particular connection I'm going to choose is connect the dot to the axis or the map. Okay. So I chose that, and right away, now all these cities are, their location is pinpointed on the map through this connection. Okay. I'm going to do a couple other things here as long as I've just put in this connection. I'm also going to do a couple other things. I'm going to make the sizes of the dots in this swarm proportional to the population. Right now, the size of the dot that I click on is arbitrary units of 5 units, okay? I want to show, though, the larger cities with larger dots. So I'm going to scale the values here, okay? And I'm going to scale the values by the population field, okay? Okay, so what this says is, hey, as your population goes from smallest to largest, the dot size is going to go from 5 to 20. That's just a convention. It's a default 20. I don't have to live with 20. If I want to make these dot sizes for the larger cities much larger, I can just scroll this. So now I've got it at 30. Let me return it down to 20, just because I think 20 is going to ultimately look a little bit better on this visualization. Okay. So the dots are elevated proportional from the distance from the Earth by the size of the population, and the dot size is also proportional to population. Okay, let's do something else. Let's also put some color into, let's make color also a function of population. So that is in the colors section here for this swarm of dots. I chose gradient scale rather than the fixed neon green that we had initially. Okay, so I say gradient scale, and Flow comes back to me and says, okay, what column do you want the gradient to be based on? And I'm choosing my favorite column here, population. So I've got everything as a function of population right now. Okay. There's nothing sacred about the colorization that we have here on a gradient scale. I can modify the gradient scale if I want. And one thing I've done before, which I kind of like, is I'm going to make the largest cities, this is the upper end of the scale, instead of being purple, which is the default, I'm going to make it a bright red. Okay, so I'm going to take this item here. I'm just going to put it in the very upper right-hand corner of this chart. So bright red now corresponds to the largest cities of the world. So this particular one, let me click on it. This is Tokyo, Japan. Okay, that's a very large city, and we could go through and we could pick up other cities also. And that's in this particular data set, by the way. Different data sets might use different conventions for establishing largest cities of the world, but in the data set we have, Tokyo is the largest city in the world with 37 million in the metro area. Okay, also, if I wanted, I could experiment around too in changing the dot color from my neon green. One I've used before, which is kind of interesting, is kind of an aqua. So this shows the ranges from aqua up to kind of a grayish on the way to becoming red. Okay, so I think for sake of example, I'm just going to return it back to the neon green just because I think it's going to show up in this. So I picked something that was close to our default neon green, probably not exactly right on. Okay. Any questions up to this point?
No, it looks great.
Okay. So now what I'm going to do here, I am going to come over here. I'm going to save this. flow. Okay. Now, I just want to say a couple words about the save function. When you're working in Flow, by default, Flow is saving your work for you about every 30 to 45 seconds. So that is done so you don't have to remember to click the save button. Now, that's one point of view. It turns out I'm kind of old school in some things, and one thing I'm old school in is I like to dictate when I want my Flow saved, rather than Flow automatically saving it for me. So I'm going to disable autosave. Okay, this is a matter of my personal choice. Okay, I like it that way because if I'm going off doing all sorts of experimental things and I don't really know where they're going to lead, the fact that Flow is not saving my flow automatically as I'm going down that path, that I'm very comfortable with that. So, and I am, from years of experience in saving, I'm very comfortable in remembering to save before I quit or whatever. So that's a personal choice whether you have autosave on or off. I like to have it off. I've talked to a lot of customers, and about half of them want to have it on and half of them want to have it off. So, okay, so we got that. The next thing I want to talk about maps is let's put some colorization into this map, into the countries of the world. Okay, what controls that is something called a choropleth. Okay, basically, I have another data file that I'm going to specify that has the population for every country in the world in terms, and they're ranked in terms of population size. So for my flow here, the cities of the world are already represented, but I'm going to superimpose on that the size of the countries, a colorization that stands for the size of countries. Okay, so let me show you how I'm going to do that. First of all, I've got to provide a data source that has that information. So what I did here is I came up to this 3 dots menu here and I clicked on data source. And now, I already see my 10,000 cities, which I picked about 15 minutes ago. I'm also going to create a new data source. And all I need to do is tell the CSV file that contains that data source. So I'm clicking edit. And over here, I'm clicking choose file. And okay, I know this file in this folder has the word country in the file name. So I'm just going to do a little search here. Oh, okay. Country world population 1. This is the CSV file that I know this is the one I want. So I'm going to choose that. I'm going to open it. So it's imported, it just imported that file into Flow. I think it's got about 190 rows in it, one for each country. And this data set has the country name, actually 2 different representations of the country name, but name is the one I'm going to be primarily interested in. It's got a value. This is the population by country. Okay, it's got region of the world it's located in. It's got population in millions, which also appears here rather than raw population. Okay, it's got the population section. This is a particular row or column that I actually added into the CSV file. And you'll see why I did it a little bit later, but population section, the top 10 countries by population in the world have a value of 5. The next 10 have a value of 4. The next 20 or so have a value of 3 and the like. So, 5 means these are really large countries. 1 means of the countries, they're very small in population compared to other countries of the world. I also put in here, and I made this correspond to the population section, I put in the hex code of a color that I am ultimately going to use for the coloring of the countries. So when I do this, I use this to illustrate that, hey, you can either use our default colorization in your choropleth, or you can actually define what the colors are going to be for each country. So, and the particular colors I chose happen to correspond to these top 10 countries, then the next 10, then the next 20. So any questions about the CSV file that I'm going to be working from?
Nope, looks good.
Great. Excellent. Okay, so let's put some colorization on this, on the countries on this globe. So I want to make sure I'm focused on the map. The choroplething is a map. It's a map attribute. So I'm coming down here for map 1, choropleth. Okay. I'm going to say, hey, the source data file that's going to control the choropleth is the country world population 1. That's the one I just imported a few seconds ago. Okay. Okay, so how do I link up that CSV file to this map? Well, the linkage column is the column called name. Okay. So now in my CSV file, I have the name of each country, and the name of each country is the same name as is understood by this globe that we're seeing. So that link has been established now by the region name. Okay, now the choropleth. I'm going to scale the value of the choropleth. Okay, and I'm going to scale it using the particular column population in millions. Okay, so that's the column. Okay, so I did that, and right away I get the choropleth that shows using Flow's default colorization. This shows the choroplething for all the countries of the world based on the population in millions field is in my data set. So I'll tell you, let me just save this. You know, I just periodically like to save. Okay, so here we got the world. The very largest, well, the range by default goes from yellow to red. Okay, so the largest countries in the world are colored red. The smallest countries in the world are bright yellow, and the kind of the intermediate sized countries in the world, like maybe, well, Japan is all covered with dots. You can't even see it, but Indonesia, let's see, Brazil, the United States, none of these are colored red. They're colored different color of orange, representing the range from yellow to red. Okay. Okay, so here we can see actually the only 2 countries in the world that actually became colored bright red are China and India. Okay. All the others, here's Pakistan here, it's orangish, Indonesia's orange. China and India are the only 2 countries that made the red scale based on the relative population in millions ranging from yellow to red. Okay, so what we've done here, this is our default. If you choose to use the Flow default colorization using this particular data set that I have. Okay, well, you know, I've got some other ideas. I think what I'd like to do is, for my application, I really want to make the top 10 countries of the world red, the next 10 orange, or some other color, and so on. So to do that, all I really need to do is I just need to change one. I need to make 2 clicks here. I need to say, hey, I'm going to, instead of using the population millions column, I am going to use the population section column. And this is the one that had 5 for India, China, the US, the top 10 countries of the world population-wise. So I'll show you what happens when I choose population section. So now the top 10 countries of the world now are colored this bright red. Okay. The bottom ones are still colored this yellow, and others are colored in different grades. Okay. So the next 10 are colored this orangish color, I think, or this kind of deep orange. So here's Argentina, pretty large country. Venezuela, I guess, a large country. Canada, pretty large country. So this is the second layer of 10 countries. Then the third layer is probably this layer here, where we've got kind of an intermediate color, and so on. So this is the colorization that I get using the default colorization scheme within Flow based on population section. And since population section only has 5 values, it's either 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. You can pretty well see which section each country is in. It's kind of interesting to see of the 10 largest countries of the world, 6 of them are located in this kind of one swath of longitude. So we've got China, Russia, China, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Indonesia. Nigeria is one of the top 10 countries of the world population-wise, Brazil, and the United States and Mexico. And I did not know all of those until I actually generated this choropleth. So I learned something doing that. Okay, the final thing I'm going to take you through, and I'm just going to save this again, just because I like to save at regular checkpoints. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take you through, and instead of using the Flow default way of ranging from the gradient from the lower to the higher, I'm going to actually control the exact color that every country is colored. Okay. So let's see how we do that. Once again, it's 2 clicks. Instead of chloroplething on the population section, actually 3 clicks, I'm going to, I'm going to set the color based on the value in the column I'm going to specify. And the particular column is called section color in my choropleth. Okay, so now here's what I've done. The top 10 countries in the world are colored deep red. The next 10 are colored, let me see, probably green, I think it is. Okay, so the next 10, I think that's what I did there. I'm not sure. I'm not sure which is which. But there's a group that are colored blue, and a group that are colored this sandy color, and a group that's colored orange. Orange is probably the second most populous. Okay. Okay, so now let's click on one of these dots here just to see what country. Well, this one's going to be obvious. Okay, this is India, Mumbai, India. Okay, let me click on one of these orange dots for an orange country. Let's see which one it is. Okay, this is Iran. So Iran is one of the countries between the 11th and the 20th position population-wise in the world. Okay, so Iran, and there are other countries that are orange, which are the 10 through the 20th largest. So Australia here, that's colored blue. Let's see, we just tap in, look at Brisbane, Australia. So, Australia is in one of the other tiers of countries. So what I've done here is by putting the color, the hex value of the color into the CSV file, I've been able to control the exact color that every country in the world is represented by. Okay, so here we go. This is the hex value for red, deep red. Okay, get rid of this. Okay, so China, India, United States, Indonesia, Pakistan, Nigeria, Brazil, Bangladesh, those are all colored, and Russia and Mexico, those are all colored deep red. Japan, Ethiopia, Philippines, Egypt, and so on, those are colored orange. And then the next tier is France, the UK, Italy, a lot of European countries are in that third tier. Those are tightly dense countries, but they're very small land areas. So they didn't make the top 20 in terms of world population. So this is how you control the exact color for each country. This is how you can kind of group countries together but still use the default method of colorization provided by Flow. And this is the field you can use if you just want to, everything is default. And the problem with this one is that China and India are so much more massive than the others that they become red, deep red, and no other country is even close. I mean, the United States is the third largest country of the world population-wise, but it's a third to a quarter the size of either of these countries. Okay. So that is choroplething on a map. Let me save this once again, because I like to save at different checkpoints. And now, that's as far as I'm really going to take this example. One other thing that's commonly done, by the way, is to put in a little legend, where you have a legend here that shows what the different colors represent. I don't think I'm going to take the time to do that right now, but I'll tell you what I'll do though. I'll take you over to a flow I have in my folder that does that, just to show you what a legend looks like. How, any questions up to now? Oh, how you're on mute if you're still there. Okay, I think Hal has had to step away. Well, I think what I'm going to do, we'll leave legends for another session, but they go hand in hand with maps. But we'll leave that, since we're kind of short on time here. We'll leave that for another time, and then I'll do that.
Yep. And Bill, actually, if you could do one thing for me real quick, which is just to share it with me. I just want to show one quick thing, which I've more recently started doing for maps, that I think you might find is interesting.
Oh, that'd be great. Okay, good. Yeah. Okay, so for this recording, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to click on the share button up here, and I'm going to share this flow privately with, actually, I'm going to share it privately with a group that we've got, which is called Flow QA. So this is going to share it with Michael, with Sierra, with Jason Marsh, our CEO, and a small number of other people. And I'm going to give them edit privileges here, which basically means they can make a copy of this flow for their own use. I'm going to click share here. Okay, so now this flow, this two-step flow, is shared with a group named Flow QA. So now at this point, I'm going to stop my screen sharing here, and Michael's going to take over.
Perfect. Thanks. So yeah, just wanted to quickly add on to this. So if I open up that flow, which was just shared with me, there's something that I've been more recently doing, which has to do with the connection lines and how you can visualize these on a map. And right now we just have straight bars. And that's fine for connecting the dot to where it is on the map. But I think it's also, it relies on your perspective of seeing it from the side a bit. Anyways, so one thing we've been trying is that if we go into advanced mode, which is under the advanced UI, we can change the texture of the connection lines, and you can change it to anything you'd like. For this, what I'm going to change it to is this file that I call white triangle PNG. These are uploaded into we have a shared folder that we got to figure out how to get more public access to, or everyone access to, but we'll include basic shapes, and I can show you what it looks like, but it just looks like a white triangle. And so now when we go to this step, you'll notice that there is more of this pin-like structure. And what I can do is adjust a few things. So if I adjust the connection thickness, and I make this more like 20, you'll start to see these come up as spikes coming out. And if I turn off the actual connection lines or the dots, you'll also start to see this. And, it's just a different perspective, different view. This looks more like mountain ranges, on a map, which I think is pretty interpretable and easier to read, but just shows you some of the flexibility in terms of what you can try. And essentially you could use any type of texture file you want. It's just the white will show and anything transparent will not show, or as black will not show. So yeah, that's the only thing I wanted to do on that. So just to show something more recent, and yeah.
That's terrific. Thank you very much, Michael.
Of course.
Okay, let's see. We'll give Hal one more chance to ask a question. Anything, Hal? Okay, he'll catch up on the recording. Sierra, did you have anything else you wanted to note?
No, I think you both did a great job of covering maps.
Okay, great. Well, I'll declare this session to be closed, and I'll stop recording at this point in time. And thank you, Hal, and your group for watching this this video, and we'll forward this on to other people too. Thanks.